one.
If you're ready to harness the power of your communications data, blast off with Nihilist today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coding with Nihilist. On these live streams, we talk about APIs, building with the Nihilist APIs, such as our email and calendar APIs, programming languages, and other things. My name is Ram, and I'm a developer advocate at Nihilist.
Hi, I'm Ram Black, Senior Developer Advocate here at Nihilist.
How you been, Black?
I've been doing fine, thanks, Ram. As I was telling you, heat wave is over. So it's getting a little bit windy, it's raining a little bit, so it's cooling down.
We're definitely having some weather changes.
Mm-hmm. Finally.
I'm excited to hear more about our hackathon. I know we have a hackathon ongoing now. Mm-hmm. And as well, we have upcoming events. So we'll talk more about that. But first, let's talk about today's topic.
Cool.
Today, we're going to explore how to build vector databases using emails. And I know that title is very lengthy. There's a lot going on in that title. What are vector databases? So we'll talk about that. We've been talking about emails for quite some time, so that part's much more familiar. I think a good place to start is just to first understand what's happening in the world of AI and APIs. So I know on a recent live stream, we went through emails by Nihilist. So this is a ChatGPT plugin that you can use to ask questions about your emails, and then you can start making calls to the Nihilist API.
Mm-hmm.
So this is great for you to start using the Nihilist APIs to start seeing what the responses look like, and as well spend more time with just kind of asking different prompts. So for example, we ask questions like, what were my statistics for my emails? Can you give me some statistics? Or can you find my last 5 emails? So anything that would correlate to an API call, you could essentially do with our ChatGPT plugin. But one area that this doesn't get to kind of go into or explore is I don't have much context of my emails up front. So I can't ask questions rapid fire. I need to make an API call for every question I ask. Yeah. And then it's only going to be what's available in that ChatGPT chat that I can reference when I have a conversation with ChatGPT. So if I ask for my statistics, I'll ask for my 5 emails, that's all the relevant information that's available to you in ChatGPT.
That's right.
So a good example is if I want to ask, hey, what did Blag email me about a meeting? We could try this with the ChatGPT plugin, but I don't know if the ChatGPT plugin would be able to do that because it would do a query, an API call query, or it would query or make an API call, but it wouldn't know what to ask our API. So there's no clear distinction. It may just look for the recent messages from Blog and go through each one, for example. Mm-hmm. So this is where would be like the next iteration of combining AI and APIs is using a vector database. So we're going to try to break this down in 2 steps. The first step is let's kind of see how we can store emails in a vector database. And the second step is how can we start using the vector database as what I like to call or the term long-term memory. So I just want to build some memory of my past emails and then start asking questions like a ChatGPT.
Okay.
So a way to describe a vector database. So I know, for example, Blog in the past, I know you've done some tutorials and code samples using like SQLite and SQL-based databases. So that's more like a relational database where you have to set up everything up front. There's also NoSQL or non-relational, where everything is more of a JSON format, where it's just a blob of data that you can query as needed. The way I like to think of vector databases is you're actually using an AI model, but this is very different from like a chat or completion model. So you're not asking questions, you're just giving it data and it's generating vectors for you.
Oh, interesting.
And how those vectors are used, it's almost used to group similar information together. So for example, let's take all the different streaming services. So if we have many conversations, like I know Blog will talk about, okay, what streaming service do you use, if any? For example, you may say like Amazon Prime. So if we took our conversation talking about Amazon Prime and we created that vector for it, it would store it in one place in the vector database. But then if we had a conversation about Netflix and we wanted to store that conversation in a vector database, it would store it, or the goal is to store it in close proximity to Amazon Prime because it's relevant information or it's related to each other. So if I wanted to query it, it would query it in a similar way where it would look for similar matches to those vectors. So if I, for example, want to say, oh, I want to learn about conversations I've had with blog about streaming services, it would create a vector query and it will look in the vector database for any relevant context or conversations that we've had in the past.
Okay, I see.
So it would pull anything we talked about. If we talked about Amazon Prime in our emails, or if we talked about Netflix, it would pull all that context and make it available to a ChatGPT.
So I guess in a way, similar kind of like Prolog works. Because in Prolog, you create like facts and then you can do queries based on those facts.
Yep.
Cool.
So let's jump into the first part. And I think this is a good place to start. So what we'll do is we'll go through like an overview, and then we'll look at the code. And then at the end, after part 2, we'll just run through the code and see what it does. So the first step, let's kind of look at how do we store emails in a vector database? What does that look like? So let me first share my screen. Here we go. Okay. Entire screen. Okay, there we go. So in this step 1, the way to look at it is first we have emails. So we'll use the Nihilist API to retrieve our emails. And then we're going to use an embedding model. And what this is going to do is it's going to take data from the email. For example, if we have a summary of the email, we're going to pass that into the embedding model. It's going to create vectors for us. So once we get those vectors, you can think of the vectors as like an array of arrays that contain numbers and locations. So all we're going to do to that is we're going to say, hey, let's take that vector and let's add some metadata. And the metadata is just going to be all the email information that we want to look up. If we ever need to look up an email ID or who the email was from, that's what a metadata shape is going to take.
Okay.
And then we're going to store it inside a vector database. So the idea is to store like things relative to each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like doing nearest neighbors.
Yeah. And we can take a look at the code. So we'll just walk through the code in terms of what do the steps look like before we jump in. So the first 3 steps we're going to do is first we're going to retrieve all our emails. Let me zoom in for that. There we go. So we're going to retrieve all our messages. So I'm just going to jump into that section. Oh. There we go. So here, all we're doing for now, just for the demo purposes or to walk through this, we're just grabbing one message at a time and we're storing all our metadata information. So we're just returning back what the message was, all the relevant metadata, which is everything in the email that we'd want to use in the future. And then we're going to store the ID as well.
Okay, gotcha.
So this is step 1. And the next step is we're going to take the message itself and then we're going to create a vector embedding. So we're going to use OpenAI to do that. And the idea behind this is we're using OpenAI's embeddings functionality, and we're passing in the model and as well the input. So that we're using their text embedding, which is ADA 002. And we're just taking the message snippet for now. And in our case, a message snippet can be considered as the actual summary of the email. And then we're just going to return the embedding back. So that's step 2. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to store that information inside a vector database. So here we're taking the embedding, which is a vector embedding, and then we're going to store that information in addition to the actual message data. So everything related to the email, such as the ID, who it's from, the data was sent, is going to be stored in the vector database.
Okay.
And here I've actually used, let me scroll up. I can show you the vector database I'm using. I'm using Pinecone to do this.
Okay, cool.
So we didn't talk about this before, but I'm using Pinecone to set up indexes. And then from there, I'm just indexing all these vectors in one index.
And that's an index you define, or it's like predefined?
It's defined. So every index is for different types of vectors of information.
Okay.
So it's useful if you want to get more granular, if you want to store certain information somewhere else, you can do that using indexes.
Okay, I see.
So here I'm essentially just adding all the information as a vector. So for example, the email ID, the vectors itself, and any metadata that I want to store.
Okay.
So now, once I've done this, I actually have a vector database.
Nice.
So if you go back to our diagram, we're at this last step where now we have a vector database.
Wow.
Yeah, does that make sense so far, Blog?
It's pretty good. I really like it. Like I told you before, I have never done anything with vector databases, so this is pretty interesting.
Awesome.
And it doesn't look like that hard. I mean, I was like, that's probably some complex LML thingy, but no, it seems to be pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think it'd get more interesting once we scale it out and start adding multiple emails, and then it's trying to figure out which are more closer to each other. So I think there'd be more work to do there. But before we jump ahead, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We love it if you can just kind of thumbs up on our videos, give us a response. Blog's doing a drive-by thumbs up. We love to hear from you. We love all your comments, any feedback. And as well, if you have any content topics you have in mind, so we're here twice a week, and we'd love to kind of get your engagement on our live streams.
Yep, we love your feedback. We love if you like our videos and you subscribe and everything. So just support the channel.
Awesome. And I think this kind of leads us to the next thing. And I know we've kind of looked at ChatGPT. I just want to take a step back and understand, what is ChatGPT doing? And the main thing ChatGPT is doing is it's stored information up to a certain point in time. So maybe up until the end of last year. So it doesn't have any relevant information. And what we're trying to do with a vector database is build out or extend ChatGPT to do more generative and question and answering. So can it answer questions that are more relevant to the context or more relevant to what I'm feeding the vector database? So one way to think of this is, how can we create email GPT?
Oh, nice.
And this is kind of the direction we want to go in, whereas how can we ask questions and have a conversation about our email as opposed to going through our inbox? And then how could we manage our email all through a chat interface? And this leads us to the next step, which is, how do we use vector databases as long-term memory? So how do we use that vector database and plug that into ChatGPT or a question and answering model? So let's jump back in to an overview first. And this is going to be step 2. So this is kind of the flow that we're going to look at next, is how can we actually build this out? And what does it look like? So let me share my screen. There we go. So here in step 2, and this is something we've seen before just using ChatGPT, but we're going to add a few more steps to it. So the first thing is the question or the prompt, which we've all seen or we've all done with ChatGPT. And then the prompt that gets fed into the embedding model. So this is the same model that we've used to create our vectors. This actually creates a query vector. So we take that query vector and we query our vector database. And what we're essentially doing, or what we're asking, is we're going, hey, vector database, here's a vector from a user asking a question. Are there any relevant vectors that we can give to our ChatGPT or our completion model? So it's going to pass back any similar vectors as context. And then all we're going to do is modify the prompt to include that additional information.
Okay.
So we take that additional information, we take the original prompt, and then we take context, and then we pass it into a ChatGPT or a completion model, and then we give the answer to the user.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like ChatGPT, instead of going like into our mailbox, it's just gonna go into the vector database to see if there's something data that can be used, right?
Yep, exactly. So it's going to say, depending on the question, if there's any relevant context,
Mhm.
it's going to take that information and pass it into ChatGPT as, hey, here's relevant information that you don't know about or you need to know about. So it's almost like it's a way of giving hints to ChatGPT on what to answer.
Yeah.
So I guess the first place to start is we need a query or a prompt. So in our case, we're going to say, hey, did Blog email me about a meeting? So it's just a question that we're going to ask to ChatGPT. And then I'm just going to go through the steps here one by one. So the first thing is we're going to create our query vector. And this is using the same model that we've used before to create vector embedding. So we're gonna create a query embedding. So we're using OpenAI.embeddings again. And then we're passing in our user query. So whatever the prompt was initially.
Mhm.
And then from here, we just take the query embedding and we send it back down for the next step. So it's very similar like we've seen before if we scroll up to the actual embeddings itself. So anytime we're storing information in a vector database, anytime we have a query, it's the same process for creating an actual vector.
Mhm.
So now that we have this, we're going to go on and actually search our vector database. So we're going to do a context search. So in this, again, we go back to our Pinecone instance and we query it using the actual user prompt as a vector.
Okay.
And then here, we're just requesting any metadata to be returned to us. And then we're going through and just returning any relevant context. So it may return multiple contexts, and we're just going through each one of them and just putting them into an array. So after we do our context search, the next thing we do is we're actually going to extend the prompt. So we're going to create the full prompt to pass to ChatGPT. And this is where it gets a little tricky. And the reason for this is because we have a character limit using ChatGPT. I think it's 4,000. So what we have to do is we have to say, okay, answer the question. So on line 131, we say, answer the question based on the context below. So we have to go through all the context, and we can only pick the context up to a certain point. And the reason being is because we have a character limit, we're only going to add as much context to stay within that character limit. And that's what this loop is doing right here.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we just do a string add. So we're adding the prompt, the initial prompt, all the context, and then we're saying, can you answer this question for us?
Interesting.
So after we do this, we're going to do the last thing, which is essentially sending the prompt. And this is something we've done before. I think we've done it recently with just making ChatGPT or OpenAI respond to emails. So here we're just going to send the prompt over to ChatGPT. So we pick the model, we send over the prompt, and then we're looking for a response from ChatGPT.
Cool.
So let's go over to the terminal. And the question I'm asking is, did Blog email me about a meeting? So it's very basic. I think I've only added a handful of emails. So I have it running here. And let me just try going through the full steps. So I'm just going to do npm start. So I'm just in the terminal. And I'm just logging everything out as I go. So here it's saying, did Blog email me about a meeting? And I know Blog's been reaching out to a lot of our developers of late. He's been doing a great job just kind of providing feedback on, hey, these are content topics, or this is some resources you can use. And here's the answer from ChatGPT. It's saying, for the question, did Blog email me about a meeting? It's saying, no, Blog emailed about resources for a comment that was made.
That's impressive.
Yeah, so this is kind of like I've gone through and logged everything out, but the idea is that you can actually use a vector database to start adding your email data into the vector database, and then you can start querying your emails essentially up until the point in time that you can decide how back in time you want to refresh your vector database. For now, I've only done perhaps 5 to 10 emails. But there's no limitation, and that's the benefit of using a vector database. You can just refresh the data as needed.
Nice. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, this is all towards my goal of having email GPT readily available for us to just have conversations about our emails, just a few conversations, and then being able to send off our emails all through a chat interface. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, totally. That's amazing. That opens a world of possibilities.
Yeah.
Great.
So, Blog, what are we going to talk about next? The hackathon?
Yeah, I guess it would be nice to mention that don't forget to go to nilas.devpost.com so you can sign up for the Nilas Hackathon. It's still going on. You still have time. Remember that the deadline is October 2nd, 2023 at 6 p.m. EDT. And also remember that you need to create a Nilas account. It's free, and you're going to be able to connect up to 10 connectors account. And also, you need to use any AI tool.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Definitely looking forward to seeing all the submissions. We've had a lot of feedback on that from the developers. So it's been great to interact with the developers as well.
Mm-hmm. As always.
Yep. Also, next week, I am in London for API Days London. So please go ahead and check that out if you are in the area or attending. Love to meet with you all developers. And as well, I'm doing a talk on generative AI. So similar to what we talked about today, how can we combine the power of generative AI and APIs?
Cool.
Yep. So check that out.
Cool.
And Blog, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Don't forget that we have live streams every Wednesday and Friday at 2 p.m. EST, 11 a.m. EST. So tune in, and you're going to be able to watch us live. You can leave comments live, and we're going to able to answer you live as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I wanted to mention that what's coming next week, this is nice. We're going to be able to test Mojo locally. So yesterday I get an email, and finally you can have Mojo running on your machine. So the kind of like the bad side is I have a Mac with Apple Silicon. So they were like, it's not actually going to be in your machine. So it's kind of. So I'm going to display that on Wednesday. But it's different that when using the Jupyter notebooks that I display on another episode. It's more likely working on a machine. There's some tweaks that you need to do, but it's nice. Everything. It's finally we can use Mojo in a more local way.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to that. And as well, before we wrap up, find us on the interwebs at Nilas. We are doing live streams. We're doing blogs. We're doing hackathons. We're at events. So if you do see us, please come up and say hi. Or if you see us on a forum or on a Discord channel, we love to hear from you. So excited to kind of connect with all the developers building with Nilas.
Yep, totally. Cool.
Awesome. That's it for the live stream. Thanks, Blog.
Thanks, Ron. Great topic.
Okay.
Everyone.